Hi, welcome to the first episode of Living Out Loud. I'm Dee Dee.
And I'm Ellen.
Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to share with you conversation, community, and awareness for the life experience that we both have endured.
And also, we would like to add that this is a podcast that was created by people who are domestic abuse survivors. And our focus, I guess, population or audience are people who are victims currently, survivors, and also their support system. And we want to acknowledge people that our support system because you when you're a person in your life who was you know experiencing domestic abuse or violence, because there are two different things, came to you and told you this, you believed them. And that is huge because that doesn't always happen. So when that person came to you and told you and you believed them, became their support system, those people need to be acknowledged, because the ones that didn't believe or chose to side with a different party, um, that's an extremely hurtful experience and actually negates or lowers someone's opinion of themselves or makes them doubt themselves. So the supporters should actually be celebrated as well in this podcast, in this audience. And also anybody else who wants to listen just for education, right? I mean,
Ab-
it's out there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ellen. Well, I think it's also a thing
You're
too
so
where,
welcome.
like you said, it's somewhere we have a community and 1 in 4 people are victims of domestic violence and domestic assault. And that's a large population. And so we really want to bring awareness to it, be a place, a safe place for community to share our own experiences, help educate, and truly be a platform where we can really help those in need and give hope to those that are on the other side of it in their journey after survival.
And also give hope to those who are actually in it, right? Like in the trenches. Um, like we talked about, Dee Dee and I have had many conversations, and one of the conversations we had was in regard to naming this podcast. And I made the suggestion of living out loud. That's a phrase you hear quite often. I mean, if you were to search it on YouTube or whatever, you'll get like music and you'll get video clips and you'll get, that all kind of like pertain to that. But the reason that it kind of struck home more for me was in a conversation I was having with Dee Dee when Dee Dee said, I
Don't want to live
don't,
small.
I don't want to live small anymore.
Mhm.
Right. And that was actually, that actually broke my heart a little bit because I know what she means, right? Like I know what she means. And I hated the fact that that's how she felt. Um, what that means to people who have experienced this is that you have been minimized and you've shrunk your own self, right, to fit into a space that is all you have left, because the abuser, and that is the term, the abuser that you are involved with, um, takes up all the air in the room, and they take up all the space in the room. And that space and that air that they take up also belongs to you, but you're actually no longer given it. So living out loud is kind of like, the voice, our voices are no longer quiet, right? And our lives are no longer small. And so living out loud kind of encompasses that. Like maybe it seems a little trite or pat, but for us, it's not, because we lived so many years trying to shrink ourselves and put ourselves into a space that we weren't creating discord.
Mhm.
And we don't want to do that anymore.
Exactly.
So that's where the title comes from.
Wow. Exactly, Ellen. Well, and something too, I remember that conversation so poignantly too. It's so sad that so many people have lived this life, and it could be a life of living that way for 6 months, 5 years, 18 years. I remember having a conversation with some woman on the phone with AT&T years back, and she said, I was in an abusive relationship for 18 years. And to think about how small her life had been shrunken down to, that was just something that, after the experiences that you and I have both had, and we're excited to share our experiences with you all over our journey, on this podcast, because it's something too where Ellen and I connect on a level that we have a lot of shared experiences, unfortunately. And we
And
definitely,
fortunately,
unfortunately, exactly. And we just want to help share that with the community here. It's a conversation that needs to be had. Ellen and I were talking recently about how so many issues are top of mind in the world and on so many different platforms, but domestic violence still is an area where we feel like the conversation needs to be had and awareness needs to be out there, and then also the support. So we're hoping to be able to provide that. And a couple of disclaimers that we want to put out there as well. Just to start off with, we are not legal counsel. We are not
no,
mandatory reporters, and
nope.
we're not here to be therapists, but truly just be a resource and support system and an educational platform for all of you. And really, how this evolves, we're excited to be able to see where things go, and also hear from everybody that's listening to see what more information we can share.
And to piggyback on that, like we said, like we're not therapists, we're not law enforcement, we're not trained in any type of like counseling for people that are going through really serious domestic um events, which we have both actually gone through. Our point in our mission and what we want to do is to let people know that they're not alone, right? Like that's something that I think is very important because a lot of times people don't talk to someone or approach someone or share their story because they're very afraid that they're not going to be believed. They're also very afraid of consequences. I mean, like we can't ignore that, right? There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of embarrassment. And this is pertaining to a wide variety of people. Like when we talk about domestic abuse, domestic violence, I think a lot of people's minds go toward man on woman, right? Man on woman. And we know for a fact, no, it's not man on woman all the time. It is woman on man. It's man on man. It's woman on woman. It does not just exist in one type of relationship.
Mhm.
So we are here for all the people. But like, when you talk about man, let's be specific because we can't. Man on woman, right? Those are more highly reported. The stats lean that way. If you go onto the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, you will see, it's 1 in 4 women that report, it's 1 in 9 men that report. Okay. And we have to also assume drastic underreporting
Absolutely. Yes.
for the
That's
reasons that we mentioned, which were shame, embarrassment, consequences. So when you see those numbers, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 9 men, you have to realize that the data is all that they can work with, right? The data is all that they can do with what they have. And you assume the underreporting. Now, those statistics, 1 in 4 and 1 in 9, that actually refers to physical, severe physical violence. Okay. That does not even speak to mental, emotional, verbal, spiritual, financial, technological. That doesn't even speak to the other abuses that exist. So it's a very kind of slippery slope when you come to the stats on abuse because they can really only garner and gather what they're getting basically through police reports of actual domestic incidents that involved violence. You and I, Dee Dee, have different experiences. We also have crossover in our experiences. It's a wide, wide swath as to what domestic abuse is.
Absolutely.
So that is something to be recognized. It is not just one thing. But as much, like the data's there and it's really coming probably from reporting agencies like maybe the National Domestic Hotline, right? Or the National, Domestic Abuse Hotline or violence or police departments. We can only report on what is actually reported.
Mhm.
And there are so many that don't because of intimidation and fear.
Absolutely. And we'll
So
dive into,
that's really important.
and I think that's a great point to say too, Ellen, because we'll definitely dive into that in like future episodes just to give everybody a little preview is we will go break that down to every type because more than likely, I mean, and Ellen and I have both experienced multiple different categories of abuse, and I think that it's something too where people I think have that kind of notion that, this is happening to me. So is that really abuse or is this happening to me? How do I report it? So we will definitely dive into all of those things because all of the types that Ellen mentioned are abuse and not okay and a form of self-doubt,
Control.
control. Exactly. We will definitely go into like the power and control wheel. We'll look at all of those different resources, not to give you all too many tidbits or hints or anything at a future episode, but definitely we want
It's all
to
coming.
stop coming. Exactly. And
All coming. Yeah.
we're going to share our experiences and really give you all a hope, awareness, and just a level of education. So as Ellen was saying as well, for the folks that are supporting those um, people in it or survivors of abuse, we definitely want to let you know how to help or the signs to look for because it's something that is there frequently. And even just like Ellen was saying, 1 in 4, that's if somebody has the ability to ask for help or to be recognized or whatever situation places them where they actually are able to get something documented.
Thank you for using the word ability.
Mhm.
Thank you for saying that. Someone who has the ability to report, because do not forget that when we are talking about domestic abuse and we're talking about control, we are talking about people who, it seems so easy for some people to be like, oh my God, why wouldn't she say anything? Right? Like, why wouldn't she say anything? Why didn't she go to someone? Why didn't she do this? Why didn't she do that? You're forgetting the fact that there is the possibility that she is absolutely kept from having the ability to make the report.
Mhm.
Okay. So like that's a great word in the sense that the ones like, with domestic abuse being underreported and, agencies actually know this. It's an assumption. It's not an assumption. It's a fact. It's underreported because these women, men, okay, all across the board, because of intimidation and manipulation and fear and shame and just personal circumstance within their household, they're actually not allowed to have the ability to report. Like you have to remember that there are people that are kept from using their phone. There are people that are kept from leaving the house. Okay. There are people that a lot of times domestic disturbances are not called in by the people that are experiencing them. They're called in by neighbors, family members, loved ones who can't get a hold of them. That is where the reportings come from. And that's where the visits are coming from. It's not actually coming from the person who's experiencing it. It's coming from people who are calling it in for them and who are watching it or have watched it for years. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I got to do something about this. Like, I have to do something. Like, this is not right. And it's like Dee Dee and I spoke about this the other day. Like, we were talking about, problems in the US, the major problems in the US, right? And we were talking about, the opioid crisis and fentanyl and, school shootings. And you know what? Domestic abuse and violence is right up there. It
Mhm.
is daily, daily happening.
And you know,
Okay. Daily.
I heard a statistic actually. Someone told me that a friend of mine who I used to work with at a domestic violence agency, ironically enough, she was telling me that she was at a meeting where they were talking about school shootings, and they went back to saying there's probably some correlation. There's a crossover between all of that. And a lot of that I really believe is safety in the home. And not necessarily, it's not always the case. I'm not saying that, or I don't have any statistics on it, but that was definitely something where there can be there can be and there cannot be, but there definitely could be the existence of some kind of overlap of what is going on in that person's home that is involved in an arena of a different type of crisis. And I know that wasn't where you're going, but I wanted to mention that too.
No, that's absolutely.
That's something that's high up there. That people are kind of just, don't you feel like it's kind of like I feel like in society, it's something that's hush hush, just like it is in someone's household. This doesn't exist. If we just don't, if it doesn't exist, it doesn't happen. It's not true. It's not really there. Whereas we're doing the same thing nationally.
Well, I will say this, and I think you'll agree with it. Um, there is an ick factor to
Mhm.
domestic abuse, right? There's an ick factor to domestic violence. Um, there are people that really don't want to be anywhere near it.
That's
And the reason they don't want to be is because then it opens up the possibility that they need to put a lens on their
Mhm.
own life, right? So it's the same with divorce. I've found that the same with divorce.
Mhm.
Divorce has an ick factor, right? Like, oh my goodness, like, I just want to stay as far away from that as possible. Like, I'm fine. Our lives are fine. We're good. I've had this happen to me. Um, Domestic violence, same thing. No, no, no. Please give me an alternate narrative of your life that's easier for me to digest
Mhm.
than what you just said to me. Because I'd
Mhm.
much rather believe the other one, right?
Mhm.
Because that makes me, myself, not me necessarily, me understood, that makes me more comfortable because I don't want to believe this can actually happen. Guess
Mhm.
what? It happens,
All the time.
according to statistics, every 20 seconds,
Mhm.
right? And it can be physical, it can be verbal, mental, emotional, like we talked about, spiritual, financial, technological.
Mhm.
Um, it happens constantly. So there are people who do shy away because it makes them uncomfortable. And I've always said that divorce, even in this day and age, divorce makes people who are married, and I'm not coming at the married people, but divorce makes people uncomfortable.
50% of
I'm,
divorce population is divorced.
I think it's actually over 50 at this point in time. Um, and domestic abuse makes people uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And that might stem from, just wanting to believe better of people. And I'm down with that. Like, absolutely. Like, I want to believe the best of people, right? But if I'm going to believe the best of people, then show me something better.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, so that's like a whole other part of it. So when I say, like, applaud the supporters, the ones that believed, like,
Mhm.
from the time the person came to them, applaud those people
Or even
because
before they came to them, if they're like the person that was notice little things.
or the person who reported, or the neighbor who called, or the family member who called and said, like, this makes me uncomfortable. I mean, how many articles have we seen nationally, right, where, estranged husband with an order of protection has killed a strange wife and either killed himself or killed the kids or whatever. And it's one of the family members who calls and says, I haven't heard from her in 3 days. This is unlike her. I talk to her every day. Something must be going on. And then they go, and the estranged husband, who has a piece of paper against him, is the one that entered the home and killed her. I mean,
Mhm.
you can search it. I mean, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And every time I see one, it makes me like absolutely crazy because it's a piece of paper, my friends. And I'm so glad and that you issued it because you recognized
Mhm.
um her plight, but enforce it. She shouldn't be left up to enforce it. And if you think an abuser, because that's what they are, it's a mentality. If you think an abuser is going to take a piece of paper and say, oh, yeah, this is going to stop me. But I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to bow down to a piece of paper.
Well,
They
and
can
also
bow
to
down to anything else.
well, I feel like we'll talk about orders of protection and restraining orders too, and that there's not to
We
say
will.
though that those are not effective in a lot of capacities. So we'll definitely talk about that. So don't be worried that we don't believe in the power of those, but I definitely agree with
I
there's always
do.
a balance, obviously, absolutely. I think it's something too where those are a powerful step for sure. However, like you're saying, Ellen, the mentality is there, the ruthlessness is there, and it's about kind of, I think, and we'll obviously share our stories with, with some guardrails around them, obviously.
Yes. We've talked
But
about this. Yes.
yeah. But it's something too where we will help you find those outlines of here's a helpful step. Here's a helpful step. Because as much as an abuser can be classic or textbook, like you like to say, but it is very true. But we also realize that everyone has a different situation. So we hope with our podcast too that we can give you tools to even gain awareness for your situation, even be able to say, oh my gosh, this is my life, and not and have that light bulb click because for so many years you might have been told that what you believe just isn't happening. That's crazy, and we all know that that doesn't feel like fun when we've both been there, Ellen. And so we just really kind of want to also give you the tools of tangible things you can do and not just feel hopeless because I know that we both have felt hopeless in our past of how do you go from here to here and and have a life that you're living out loud and you're living big and not small anymore and you're not feeling like that there's no hope out there. That's what you really want to give everybody.
Right. And so that's the point, right? Like, um, even though today we look really great, um, we had our moments and we had our dark spaces and we had our low times and we had points where we didn't really know what to do. And I know in my personal experience, it was, I didn't tell anybody,
Mhm.
right? So I didn't tell anybody. And because, you're obviously fearful of oh my God, what are you talking about? He's such a great guy, Ellen. Um, these three wonderful kids, like what I think you're just going through a rough patch in your marriage, right? Like you're just going, it's just marriage, whatever. No, it wasn't just marriage. It wasn't.
Mhm.
It took me a long time to realize that. It took me a long time to actually say to myself in the mirror, um, you're a victim,
Mhm.
right? Those are hard words because you like to think of yourself as being really strong and really, like you're on top of everything. There's a bunch of stuff I was on top on, right? Like, I mean, I was great in my career, loved the people I worked with. I was successful in
But
my
not
job, right? Like I was successful in my job. I didn't look like a tit show. I really didn't. I mean, I was holding it together, but it's all the behind the scenes that people don't see. It's all the pulling into the driveway at the end of the day and dreading walking in the door,
Mhm.
right? Dreading walking in the door. Even though you want to see your children, dreading what's coming your way
Mhm.
because you're not quite sure what it's going to. And this is just I really truly hope. I mean, like, this is our first episode, obviously. We have no idea who this is reaching, who's listening, who's watching, whatever. But if there are people out there right now who feel like they are literally at their absolute lowest point and they're feeling hopeless and they're feeling, I can't get out of this. There's no recourse. How am I going to do this? I have young kids, or I have, teenage kids, or I have kids in general. There's always a way out. And you owe it to yourself and to your children, right? And I'm not lecturing you. I'm just telling you, there's always a way out because, like Dee Dee and I have spoken about, you've got this one life. You've got this one life. And how do you want it to be? Because nobody on this earth was ever put here to be mistreated, to be torn down for someone else's, I don't know, pure pleasure or benefit. I'm not even quite sure. We'll get into abusive mentalities later on, but like, nobody was put here for this.
Mhm.
And Dee Dee and I have spoken about, like, don't let somebody else determine what your truth is, right? Like, nobody else has that power. That's only you. Um, Especially not someone who's broken and damaged. And, like, these are not the people that these aren't the voices that you should be listening to. Like, listen to your own voice. And it's just so very important for us to, and that's how we came together, basically, like, by very good fortune. Dee Dee and I actually work for the same employer. Our roles do not overlap at all. And we live in different states, we work remotely, but we just so happened to be in a common need. And somebody somewhere along the line, like in the chat, made a comment about being a survivor.
Mhm.
And that is where this all started. Because both of us did not hold back and we both participated and said, so am I,
Mhm.
so am I. And so this is why we wanted to do this because there's just so many people out there. It's like you feel so lost and you feel like there's no one there. And the thing is, there's so many people there. Like, there's so many people there. And so why not have another, like, avenue, right? Like, another, like, oh my God, email us, like, follow our channel, which that'll be coming. Like, what do you want to know? Because we'll tell you. And hopefully you're in a safe space when you want to communicate, because we know how that is too. We're here. Like, that is absolutely what we want to impress upon people. And of course, I've been talking too much because that's what I do. So, Dee Dee, you may chime in at this point in time.
I love it, Ellen. Thank you for sharing all that. I think that it's exactly right. And like, I love that we were connected in that capacity. And that was not that long ago, actually. This was not that
No, it
long
wasn't.
ago that we were, became friends and had this idea of, how do we help other people? And I think to your point too, Ellen, it's something where I know for myself when I was in my relationship, it was something where I didn't know other people that I could reach out to. I didn't know who do I reach out to or say, "Hey, can you tell me more about this?" And I think that unfortunately, and this is the thing that makes me really sad, but then also really grateful when people do find their voice and we have a platform like this where people can feel comfortable is people come out of the woodworks, saying, like, I've been there too, or I am there. Like, how do you help me? And everyone has that light bulb moment where they say, I can't live like that anymore. And I know I had it where I said, this cannot be my life anymore. Or my child's life.
Right.
And we want better. And obviously, it is when you have kids, it changes the scope of so many of the factors here. But I think to your point too, people feel like they don't have anybody or like, who do I go to? And I really, we'll dive into it in a future episode too of
We will. Yeah.
not like people that are not believed because we've been told for so many years and conditioned by these abusers to feel like oh, that didn't happen. That doesn't matter. No one's going to believe you anyway. And we have um we'll share also experiences because we know we'll probably have listeners as well that are saying, I tried to leave 3 times, or I tried to leave this many times, or I did open up to people and this is what happened.
Mhm.
And there's so many layers to it. Somebody told me that earlier this year, and they were like, it's just a lot of, it's very layered. And
It's very
abuse,
complicated,
yeah, abuse is.
right? Like it is. It's very
Mhm,
complicated. And, there are a lot of people, and I understand this. I mean, it wouldn't be me, I can tell you that right now. But there are a lot of people that don't want to get involved,
mhm,
right? And we were speaking the other day about launching this, and I have to bring this up because you and I both had like a moment like, you know, and you were like, do you really, do you think we should, like, are you comfortable with, you know, like putting it on YouTube? Like, are you okay with that? And I was like, oh, I know in the beginning, I was like, oh, like maybe not, like, oh, geez. And then I was like, are you comfortable? Like, are we okay? And then both of us were like, whoa, like, hold on a second. What we are literally cycling through right now is self-doubt that was planted in our heads methodically, deliberately, Um, and we reverted. The two of you, both of us together, reverted to like, oh, you know what? Maybe we should, oh, that might not. And then both of us like snapped out of it and we're like, oh my gosh, we just went back down the rabbit hole, right?
mhm,
We just went back down the rabbit hole. And
mhm,
we did it at the same time. And
mhm,
it's like ingrained, indoctrinated behavior,
mhm,
that we immediately were like, oh, maybe, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't do this. Like
mhm.
maybe this might be a bad idea. Like what would happen? What could happen? What
What
could happen to
retaliation are
us?
they gonna have on us? What retaliation is gonna be there? What kind of like, ooh, what is this, what if game happened? But I think to your point, I think we got on the other side of it quickly because
We
we
did.
thought, how do we help
No, we
other
like
people?
nipped it in the bud. We were both like, wait,
Right. And you know
there it
why?
is.
Because it's our story. It's what happened to us. And I think that that's like, I'm so glad you bring this up because it's exactly what that is. It happened in a switch. But again, listeners, do not be sad or worried if you're not there yet. We do not
No,
expect
do not.
there
Do not.
because it's been, years since, Ellen and I have been divorced, each of us, and away from that abuser in some capacity. You're always kind of tied to them in some realm. However, for
We'll get to
years,
that too.
yeah, exactly. But
We'll
that's the
get
thing.
to that.
We got on the other side of it because we know our purpose and mission is to give awareness, to share our stories, to be helpful, not to bash anybody, not to,
Nope.
call anybody
Nope.
specifically out. That is not, we want to be very clear about that here. That is not the purpose. This is not a bash session. This is literally to say, this is the survival story that I have, that we have, and
Right.
we want to help give you tools, be a place to listen, and really just make you not feel alone. That's, I think, our biggest mission here.
Yeah, I think that that is definitely it's support. It is resources.
Mhm,
It is sharing experiences so that you don't feel alone. Because if Dee Dee and I share our personal experiences, I can guarantee you, anybody who's listening or watching, you will see yourself or hear yourself in those experiences.
mhm,
We are not here to bash. We actually actively talked about this. This is not a platform for us to bash our previous um, spouses, partners that were involved in our lives for two reasons. Number one, we don't want them living rent free in our heads. And number two, it's over. Actually, I've got three. I got three. Number two, it's over. And number three, they don't deserve our airtime.
Mhm.
So our airtime is actually concentrated on focusing on the I, which means we will tell you how we felt. We will give you some facts as to these incidents, and they are facts because Dee Dee and I, we've talked about this. We can both provide, like, should we even say it? Police reports, court judgments, right? Like, we can provide those things because we have them. This is
Oh,
not to
yeah, here.
bash. This is not to bash the other person. This is to provide factual information, how we felt at the time, how we got over it. Hopefully to help anybody out there who, again, is still in the trenches or who may be getting over to the other side, who may be on the other side, because there's always, things that happen even when you're out of it. So
Mhm.
that's what we're here for. And I mean, Dee Dee and I, if we were not on talking points right now, this episode would be 8.5 hours long. And I'm not even kidding you. We could go forever. So
Mhm.
we need to like ration ourselves,
Plenty more to
fully
go.
ration ourselves, because we could talk about this for days,
Mhm.
days and days and days. And we do need to acknowledge, I think, a few people. Um, so you talk about the music that we'll be using. Hopefully, our first episode will be edited well. We have this music, but this is very much a work in progress. But go ahead.
Great. So when Ellen and I were thinking of who we wanted and what song we thought would fit perfectly, so that our intro and outro we attribute to the song "Who You Are" is written, composed, and performed by Levi Britton, wonderful musician, and you can check him out at levibritton.com for local shows. But thank you, Levi, for our intro and outro, and just being able to provide great lyrics for our podcast.
Thank you, Levi. And then also, too, we do have someone who's doing a little bit of editing slash producing for us. And this is merely because neither one of us understand how to do it. So we were like, let's take a look around. And so one of my boys' friends, the great Nate White, is going to be our producer slash editor. 19 years old, man. Like the kids, he's talented. He knows what he's doing. I'm so glad that I have him as my children's friend and as a resource because he's a great kid.
And he joined our
Um,
village to help us launch this podcast, both of
and
us being.
plus, he's like down with helping us launch it. Like, I think he was kind of like, oh, okay. All right. Well, I was like, I'll pay you. He was like, oh, cool. So, also, too, this might be being conveyed to some people as a podcast. So, audio only. And that is just one of the platforms. But in addition to the audio, we also have a YouTube channel. And that YouTube channel is, and I'm going to have to actually look this up right now because I think I have it written down. But hold on, I'm going to minimize my window. Hopefully it doesn't do anything. But if you cannot minimize Zoom or you're recording this meeting. So our YouTube channel, it's called Living Out Loud. But if you search that, you're going to get a zillion different like results. So if you do at at capital LIV, capital OUT, capital LD 24 dash, I think it's lowercase f, lowercase e, 5YC. That's our handle.
Perfect. And we'll try to include that in any kind of notes that we have along the way.
Of
And
course.
we'll give more information as well whenever we do produce more of, making sure we always have that on here and put that. We can even try to put it in um our.
Well, listen, this is our baby podcast, right? Like this is like our first time out. So, but this is like infant steps. And we will definitely, I should have written that down actually before I got on here with you. but you can find it. And if anybody actually really wants to know, um, they can respond to this podcast,
Mhm.
like over Apple, because I think Apple's one of our forms,
Yeah, one of
and
my favorite
Spotify. It's
yes.
entirely possible to find us. But we're so glad to be here. And we're so glad that I mean, like, I consider it an absolute stroke of good fortune that I met Dee Dee, when I did and how I did. Because one of the things that I never did when I was going through my situation is I actually never involved myself in a survivors group. And it was something that my sister kept telling me to do. And I was like, no, I have a therapist. She specializes in domestic abuse. Like, I'm good. And she was like, you really need a lot of times to be in a group with people who have gone through the same thing in varying degrees. And you know what? She was so right. It's so important because it does make you feel like you're part of a community, like we talked about. And it changes it. It really does.
Mhm.
Because even though we relive some things, as we have, relive a few things, like tap back into some things, just that feeling of not being alone and also not being crazy,
Mhm.
which we've had that thrown at us a million times.
Mhm.
It really just kind of, it's very therapeutic. It's extremely
Absolutely.
therapeutic.
Or hearing what other someone's
So
gone through and not alone in general, like physically, but like emotionally not alone, but not having to be like, oh, that happened to you too. Okay, that was messed up. But and just having that unfortunate relatability.
the commonality, right? Like to see, like we've talked about this, the commonality, like, oh my goodness, are they reading a guidebook? Like, and to see, because we've had conversations with other people that we won't disclose, but to see the commonality
Hmm.
and to be like, whoa, like I thought that was just me.
Hmm.
And to know that it's not just you. So you know what? It's not just you, and you're not alone. And there are people here, however this goes, right, Dee Dee? However this goes. Like if this falls on its face, or if it, gets us, people who actually want to be involved, whoever you are, if you're listening, if you're watching, if you want to give it to someone that you want to hear it, because you support them. The main message is this is real. You are not crazy by any means. This is happening. You don't deserve it. And it's not your fault. That's
Hmm.
what Dee Dee and I have spoken about so many times. It's not your fault. Like, and you matter. And that's something that we really feel so strongly about.
Hmm.
Like, you matter. Like, if you're in this very low point and you feel, and you've been torn down and you feel like your words don't matter, your opinions don't matter, like nothing you do is right, right? No,
Hmm.
you matter.
Hmm.
And even though I created like our podcast platform to say that this was a clean podcast, you fucking matter. Okay. Like across the board.
Sure, you're welcome.
And yes, I use the F word. You fucking matter. And if you don't believe it right now, we're going to keep telling you every week.
Yep. Love that. I think that's so important to convey, Ellen. It's like you matter and you have one life,
You
one
do.
chance at this life.
This is
And
it.
because what your past was or where your present currently is does not mean that that's what your future has to be.
Nope.
So just
And
remember,
that is an awesome way to end.
thank you
As
so much.
usual, you are brilliant. And I applaud you.
Well, I feel like it's something too, where just also know that if you don't have anybody in your life who believes in you, we don't even know you, but we do. And we're here to guide you and to support you. And we hope that you appreciated and enjoy this first episode of ours. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for participating with us. And we will have many more episodes to come. And thank you for taking the time. And please stay safe and believe in yourself.
Please stay safe. Yes, and believe in yourself. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Thank you, Ellen. Such a
My
lovely.
my new favorite person. All
Oh,
right,
thank
we'll be back, everyone. We'll be
you.
back.
Every
So
every 2 weeks we'll
we
have a
think
new
in 2
episode.
weeks, 1 week. Okay, that's all going to be worked out. We'll bring that to you in our next one.
Many,
All
many
right.
more episodes to come. We won't be something that you have
Many,
to wait
many.
around for too long for to get our next episode.
That's right. All right. Everyone stay safe and love yourself.
Exactly.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.